David here with Figboot on pens, back again with another fountain pen review. Now, one of the areas I don't cover that much on this channel is a genre I will broadly describe as inexpensive Chinese-made pens. There are a lot of folks out there that swear by these pens, and there's nothing wrong with that. One of the things I love about this hobby is that it can be enjoyed at virtually every price point. But for me, this zone of the fountain pen hobby historically hasn't really connected with me personally. Early in my pen journey, I tried out a few and wasn't that impressed. The overall quality was lacking from the pens that I had purchased. But over the last couple of years, there has been a significant improvement in the quality of the pens coming out of the Far East. A couple of years ago, I reviewed a model from Asvine. I believe it was the V169, and I was really impressed. So when Asvine recently reached out to me to see if I would care to review a couple more of their recent releases, I agreed and was curious how I would care for these models. I have one that we'll be looking at today and another which I'll get to here in a bit. And the one I'll be showing you today is called the Asvine P36. What I'm going to do today is go over the parts and features of the P36, talk about what I care for and what I don't care for about the pen. I'll show some measurements, size comparisons, and provide a writing sample. Thanks go out to Asvine for providing this pen for review. The pen arrives in this box with the company name. I have heard the company name pronounced in several different ways. Asvine, I'm not sure which is technically correct, but I'm going with Asvine. Inside, once you can get this out, you have a translucent plastic box. There are some instructions in here which contain a basic guide to how to use various types of fountain pen filling systems. And then we have nestled in some foam, we have the pen. This is the Asvine P36. I will say the company doesn't have the most inspired names for their pens. From what I've seen, they're all numbers preceded by either a P, which indicates a pen that is a piston filler, or a V, indicating a vacuum filler. With this pen being the P36, it is indeed a piston filler. The cap and barrel feature a transparent resin with a titanium trim and accents. Now, the very first thing I thought of when I saw this pen was that it looked very similar to the Conid bulk filler king size. Here's a side-by-side comparison. There's a number of similarities. Now, the bulk filler in my collection has flat ends, but it's also available with rounded ends, similar to the Asvine. While there are many different clear demonstrators out there, what really did it for me here is the similarity of the clip design, which is very similar, albeit slightly longer on the Conid. This brings up the discussion of whether or not a pen was inspired by another one or is a knockoff or imitation. With the Asvine, I certainly feel like it was inspired by the Conid, but there are enough subtle differences to where I don't feel I can say the goal here was to create an imitation product. They are also utilizing a different filling system. I wouldn't go as far as to call the Asvine a clone, but you would be naive not to think that there was some intention behind the design. Another big difference between these pens is the price. The Conid sells for almost $1,000 and the Asvine is $45. So they're not really appealing to the same market. Okay, enough about that. Let's move on to the parts and features of the P36. I will say this titanium trim paired with the translucent resin does look sharp. The top of the cap is rounded. The titanium has a bit of a matte finish, but if you look closely, you can see that there is grooved tool marks, so it has a very slight texture as opposed to being more polished. The clip is a bit wide and a bit on the stiffer side. While I do like that you get a good look at the nib through the transparent cap, it kind of annoys me that while there are two different entry points for the cap threads, neither of them puts the nib in an orientation where it is either facing directly up or directly down in relation to the clip. If you have a cap which is opaque, then this orientation really doesn't matter in my opinion. But if you can see the nib, then having it out of alignment just looks a little sloppy in my mind. On a side note, my Conid does orient correctly. The back portion of the cap provides a bit of an optical illusion. It almost appears like it is metal, but that's just the section you're seeing through the translucent resin. At the end of the cap, there is a metal band, which on one side has the company name, and on the other is the model number of this pen, P36. And there's a medium-sized step down from the cap to the barrel. The barrel does have the slightest of curves to it. It angles up only about 0.5 millimeter before tapering down to the end, where there is a titanium piston knob, which is rounded. The barrel, again, is transparent, and I think that provides a good look at this rather large ink chamber. There are certain pens which I feel best match up with certain colors of ink, but I feel this pen would match up with just about any color of ink, so it really opens up the ink pairing possibilities. I think I'll maybe put something bright and colorful in here for the writing sample. The cap twists off in just under 2 rotations, and underneath we have a stainless steel number 6 nib. This nib is available in either extra fine, fine, or medium. And here's a look at the plastic feed. The section is metal and concave. 2 elements reduce the potential slipperiness of this section. It is fairly concave, which helps. And then, as I showed earlier, the metal is not completely polished, and the slight texture of this groove serves to help your grip from slipping around. The pen kind of posts, but I wouldn't recommend it. It does not post very deeply, and it isn't secure, and it is posting metal on metal, so I'd be afraid that the contact would over time scratch up the piston knob. That's fine, though, that this pen is plenty long enough to use comfortably unposted. I mentioned this before, but this is a piston filler. I do find the mechanism to be fairly smooth, which is nice. The Asvine P36 is mainly available directly from the company via Amazon. I will put a link to where you can find it on Amazon in the notes below, and it retails for $45. For $45, you'll be hard-pressed to find another pen of higher quality. I do feel that it's a good value proposition at this price point. I am not fond of the overall attempt to mimic a Conid bulk filler, but as I mentioned, I don't feel that attempt was egregious enough for me to call this a clone or copycat. If I felt that way, you probably would not be seeing this review. I tend not to want to draw attention to the pens which I feel are blatant ripoffs of other models. This can be a very gray topic with varying opinions, though. Okay, now it is time for some measurements, size comparisons, and a writing sample. Here we go with some size comparisons for the Asvine P36. Here it is again with that Conid bulk filler king size. This is the other Asvine pen that I reviewed a little while ago, which was called the V169, which has an interesting overlay to it. And then just because it has another interesting overlay to it, which is the Conklin Endura Decacrest. And that's what it looks like in comparison to the P36. In regard to some other pens, here it is with the Lamy Safari and the TWSBI VAC 700 Iris. And then here it is with a Retro 51 Torpedo, and this is indeed a fountain pen. They do have some interesting fountain pens at Retro 51 as well, with some cool designs. In regard to some uncapped comparisons, here it is with the Safari and the VAC 700, and then this is what it looks like with the V169. Let's go ahead and ink this pen up, and I thought that I would use a nice vibrant ink, and this is certainly that. This is from Kala, and this is their Neon Violet. Kala came out with an entire series of neon colors, and they're interesting. So I thought that it would look cool here in this particular pen. So let's go ahead and ink that up and wipe that off, and we should be good to go. So now you can see that that is a rather bold pop of color. Let's go ahead and cap that just so you can see what it looks like capped. That does add a bit of color to it. The one thing, I like these neon inks, but they are a bit milky in color. So it just has a bit of a milky look to it. But let's go ahead with the writing samples. So we have the Asvine. And this is the P36. And this is a medium stainless steel nib. And the ink I'm using, as I already showed you, which is Kala Neon Violet. This is what the ink looks like. It's a nice vibrant violet. If you put neon in the name, it's going to have to be. This is what it looks like in comparison to the Montblanc's Beetles Psychedelic Purple. And then here it is with one of my other favorite purples, which is the Pilot Iroshizuku Murasaki Shikabue. And here we go with the rest of the writing sample. I do find this nib, it is stainless steel. You can get a little bit of flexibility out of here. Starting off with no pressure and going to some more. I will say that it does write more on the broad side of medium. And the ink flow is decent. And in regard to reverse writing, it's actually very smooth. And then in regard to some fast writing, the feed keeps up very well. So there we have the Asvine P36. I think it's a very interesting model. For the price, I think that it's built very well. It looks very sharp. There's a couple of nitpicky things I have with it, but other than that, it's an interesting offering. And so I'm kind of looking forward. I'm not going to be opening up the doors and taking a look at tons of pens in this genre, but I'm at least open to taking a look at more. So you might see more in the future on the channel. Okay, until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.